When it comes to horse racing, you can never have too much information. With Twin Spires, you can place your bets with confidence, whether you use handicapping insights like our Brisnet speed ratings, prime power and past performances, the guidance of our experts' top picks, or just choose a name that catches your eye. Yes! No matter how you pick your horse, bet with Twin Spires. And now you can race to victory with Twin Spires tournaments.
Welcome back to the Twin Spires Racing Roundtable. I'm Ashley Anderson, joined by Nick Tammaro, who's filling in for James Scully today, and Vance Hanson. I'm back from a brief hiatus. I had back issues because I'm getting older, but here I am, and very happy that Nick is here along with Vance to talk about Magnitude's return to the race as a very big win at Prairie Meadows in the Iowa Derby this past weekend, plus Saratoga's July Racing Festival, a lot of top performances and some beaten favorites. Plus, we'll talk what else caught our eye from the weekend, as always. Nick, since you're our special guest, I will let you kick things off and talk about Magnitude, trained by Steve Asmussen, who won a very big race over the weekend.
Yeah, we have kind of an embarrassment of riches. I'm glad to be back with you guys. In the 3-year-old division right now, based on what we saw through the Triple Crown series, culminating with the Belmont 1-2-3 finishers matching up with the Derby 1-2-3 finishers and the Preakness winner running in all 3 legs. It was incredible to have Sovereignty Journalism and Baeza perform the way they did. And it looks like the 3-year-old ranks are really only getting stronger, guys, with Magnitude coming back, looking none the worse for wear, wire-to-wire win, albeit against a totally overmatched field. That's why he was an overwhelming favorite. But I thought Steve Asmussen took a good opportunity to find a relatively soft spot to bring him back, and he was able to do his thing. Now, this is a horse that obviously we all knew had a pretty immense amount of talent based on the race that he ran in the Risen Star, and then he had that setback coming out of it that derailed the rest of his Triple Crown aspirations. But at least he's back. You know, I will admit I'm no vet. I didn't know if he'd be back this quickly. And the fact that he is, I think, is a great sign. What you're seeing here, obviously, in the replay is him controlling things on the front end. And though I referenced that the field was pretty overmatched, it's my birthday was 2-1 in there and received plenty of support with Magnitude going off 3-5. There's a couple of things along the way that weren't the best of signs as you were watching the race live. The second happened so close to the wire, it probably doesn't matter quite as much. But you're going to notice that Magnitude swaps leads at just past the quarter pole, which is rare at a racetrack that's laid out like Prairie Meadows. That's something you'll see a little bit more often at places like Gulfstream or Belmont Park that have these broad sweeping turns where horses get a little tired of being on their left lead, which is the lead that they switch to when they're turning. And it's going to happen now in a couple of seconds. But it didn't seem to make that big a difference for Ben Curtis in terms of keeping him at a point where he could be in front comfortably. It happens right here past the quarter pole. You notice that he changed right there, and then into the stretch, he continues on, and he swaps leads late again. Now, this is something we've seen Steve Asmussen horses do with regularity in the past, and it's not really that big a deal because Gunrunner did it really throughout the early part of his 3-year-old campaign and didn't seem to affect him terribly. But we'd like to see Magnitude look a little cleaner with some of those lead changes. Nonetheless, he's a fascinating horse, and I would imagine destined for a Grade 1 objective next, presumably a race like the Travers. Even though Steve didn't commit to it right away, you would think that's been their goal all along.
Do you feel like he would stack up against the likes of, say, Fierceness, going up potentially against Mindframe in the Travers or another big race like that? Do you think he's going to fit with them, especially with that run style of going straight to the front?
Well, fortunately, he won't have to worry about them in the Travers. He would have to worry about them in the Whitney, which he'll be no part of. But yeah, I mean, sovereignty and journalism would be the big thing. The interesting thing is from a running style perspective, he's a speed horse, and most of the heavies in this division are off the pace horses. So unless like an East Avenue or somebody like that really takes a step forward, it looks like he might get a good run of the race having that significant early speed. And if he does, then I would imagine he'll make his presence known wherever he lands. Fast horses generally speed plays well on dirt.
Vance, what do you think about that? Do you think he's going to fit up there at the top in the 3-year-old division?
Well, he's certainly fast enough. I mean, he's recorded 2 back-to-back triple Brisnet speed figures for the Risen Star and the Iowa Derby. Yeah, he could very well show up in the Travers, as Nick said. I kind of wonder if Steve wants to take maybe a little slower path to reach to the top of the division. I mean, he's got a lot of time between now and the end of the year. If he decides to take a pass on the Travers, I wonder if he might want to try and stretch him out first of all in the Pennsylvania Derby. That's a grade 1 mile and 1/8 near the end of September, and then he could go from there to the Breeders' Cup. How he gets from here to the Pennsylvania Derby, I suppose the West Virginia Derby is probably the only real bridge to that race that's fitting for this horse. But yeah, loads of talent, no question about it. And he's going to be a very interesting prospect, even though Sovereignty has won 2 legs of the Triple Crown and is clearly in the pole position for champion 3-year-old. I think Magnitude could make some noise in the division going forward the rest of the year.
And apologies, I don't know why I said fierceness and mind frame. I think I'm going to blame it on the muscle relaxers for my
Just
back.
living in 2020.
But anyways, I'm looking ahead to next year. But as you were saying, Vance, yes, I think he certainly could fit in there, but I do think that with the closers we have in the 3-year-old division, and if he's going to have to go head-to-head with other speed, it's going to set up well for the likes of Sovereignty, who I think is at the top of the division currently. But he does, I mean, the way he's won the Risen Star and the way he won this past weekend, he looks like a stellar horse. It's just very interesting that we missed him in the Triple Crown, and I'm not quite sure what to expect with tougher competition that he didn't really see at Prairie Meadows this weekend. Well, let's move over to Saratoga for the July Racing Festival, where we had 4 days of racing before we kick off this summer meet on Thursday. And of course, we had some big names running at the spa, and a lot of them did not reach the winner's circle, who were post-time favorites. But Vance, what were your takeaways from Saratoga this past weekend?
Well, a standout performance for me was Bring the Band Home in the Harvey Pack Stakes last Friday. It was a 5.5 furlong turf sprint for older horses. And you see here, Bring the Band Home broke out on top. Owned by Live Oak, trained by Mark Cassey. He did his very best impersonation of Cogburn in this event. Went out there. The turf course at Saratoga this past week was playing extremely fast, and you'll see the splits as he runs away from the field here. 21 and change for the opening quarter. He's going to finish up in under 1 minute for 5.5 furlongs. That's something Cogburn did last season. And but yeah, you don't expect to see that kind of a performance on any type of turf course. And you notice the rail is out too, so you'd expect a little bit of a slower time than a sub 1 minute. But yeah, he really rolled to victory here. Very impressive. He never showed this kind of a race before. The Harvey Pack. He had one over the Saratoga turf course last year, so there's a question for me whether he just might be a Saratoga type horse and whether he can reproduce this somewhere else along the line. But he'll stay at the spa this summer. The Troy Stakes is an obvious target, but this looks like a legitimate Breeders' Cup turf sprint contender to me.
Nick, did anyone stand out to you from Saratoga?
Yeah, Obliteration I thought was outstanding in the Sanford. He got a very fast speed figure on all the quantifiable numbers and looked really good, validating a tremendously impressive debut win at Churchill. Flavien Prat got on board, and he was kind of a co-favorite with Blinging It Back. Blinging It Back had just run second in the Tremont, but you could tell really going around the turn in this race that Obliteration, I mean, Flavien was just sitting on a keg of dynamite, right? He was ready to let him loose, and that was it. So he looks very, very good and a very promising early season 2-year-old headed now towards the Saratoga Special and then the Hopeful. And I absolutely love Steve Asmussen's comment. And I am not Steve's PR agent, as it might look on this show. So Steve was asked whether he'd wait to run him in the Hopeful, and he said, that's too damn long. So I want more trainers that want to run horses that frequently. So it looks like we'll see Obliteration take a path that'll be a little bit similar to Jackie's Warrior. It was a different calendar back in 2020 when Jackie's Warrior was a 2-year-old, but he'll go to the Saratoga Special, presumably, and then the Hopeful. And I mean, look at him go. He's extending from these horses and understanding, of course, these are early season 2-year-olds. So the competition will obviously become more robust. There was a very impressive 2-year-old winner of the opener on Saturday named Ewing, who he would undoubtedly face at some point in the future. But Obliteration looks like a horse that's very precocious. And the thing is, in Asmussen's hands, you feel like this is a horse that is still likely to get better, even as fast as he is. We've seen Steve do amazing work with 2-year-olds over the years, and this one looks like he could be top flight for sure.
Yeah, he broke his maiden by 7.5 lengths at Churchill, and then that was an 83 brisnet speed figure that day. Got a 97 this past weekend, so that was a huge jump, and then won by even more lengths, going 6 furlongs. So very excited to see what he does as he continues to progress. And then for me, I was going to point out in general at Saratoga, they say it's the graveyard of champions, graveyard of favorites. Obliteration was a favorite who did come through this weekend, but overall, it was pretty dicey for some of these post-time favorites. Of course, on the first day of the festival, it was going pretty well. There weren't a ton of stakes on that card, and I believe overall favorites went 7 for 11, but on July 4th, just 1 for 11. Zulu Kingdom was the only one who went unscathed, and he had to overcome a challenge from a huge long shot late in the Grade 3 Manila. But of course, the big names that didn't come through, Locked put in a disappointing effort in the Grade 2 Suburban. We also had New Century in the Belmont Derby, who was a lukewarm favorite and I thought vulnerable, but ended up finishing 5th to Test Score, who was 3-1 at post time. And then in the Harvey Pack, we just watched Bring the Band Home, who beat Works for Me, who was another lukewarm favorite. And then in the Schuylerville, My Sweetheart looked like maybe she was going to run away with it, and then ended up Kingsolver came through and got the win that day. So not a great day for favorites, which is not surprising at Saratoga, but the same thing on Saturday. A little bit better, 4 for 12, but in those big stakes races, of course, the big one that was a surprise was Nitrogen getting beaten by Fion in the Belmont Oaks, a grade 1. And then we had a couple others as well in the Kelso. Think Big was a square price, 6-1, beating Intellect, who was around 2-1. And on Sunday, a little bit of a bounce back at 3 for 10. So I think favorites came through maybe at 35% is what I had, 34% over the weekend, which, again, it's Saratoga.
Yeah, good competitive racing is going to lead to it, right? I mean, I think the biggest upset by far was Nitrogen being beaten by Fion. And I mean, it's hard to beat up on Nitrogen. She lost by a head in a race where she definitely ran well. I think, she was victimized a bit by some of the hysteria around horses that get on win streaks and they begin to look invincible. And I think people were overrating her in many ways. I think she's outstanding, don't get me wrong, but the big margin victory in an off the turf race, that's irrelevant. Those were two horses that she beat that are never going to run on dirt again. And I think everybody gave her this inflated level of respect. She's obviously still very good. I was a little surprised to hear Mark Casse say he is going to bring her back in the Alabama, and I guess wants to give her a fair shot on dirt. But, nobody has really stepped forward in the 3-year-old filly division now that it looks like Good Cheer is going to be given a little time before the Alabama. Nobody stepped up and said, hey, I'm the boss. So they're going to take their chances with Nitrogen.
Yeah. Well, let's look outside of Saratoga. We had a ton of racing action at Horseshoe, Indianapolis, Prairie Meadows, of course, as we already talked about, and even overseas. So, Nick, what else caught your eye from the weekend?
I think the Horseshoe Indianapolis races were very, very good to see. Big day for them out there. Tip Top Thomas got the job done in the Indiana Derby. I think in terms of horses that ran on that card that might make more of a grade 1 impact soon, you'd probably give a slight edge to Clico, who you could see come back in a race like the Alabama potentially for Brendan Walsh. She made it 2 straight wins in taking the Indiana Oaks. Tip Top Thomas, Todd Pletcher said afterwards, is not a Travers horse and wants to run him in the Smarty Jones and then the Pennsylvania Derby, which seems like kind of a good move to zig while everyone else zags. And nonetheless, I mean, they were both solid efforts, and it was good to see a nice day of racing down in Indy.
Vance, what about you?
Well, overseas on Saturday, they had the Eclipse Stakes at Sandown in England, which is typically the first meeting of the generations, 3-year-olds stepping up to face older horses over 1.25 miles. Budsman was the big favorite here. In the Godolphin Blue here, you see striking the front. He was coming off a very impressive win in the Prince of Wales' Stakes at Royal Ascot just 17 days earlier. Looks like he's going to be going on to victory here. He's kind of holding off Camille Pissarro, but then coming up on the far outside in the Magnier colors will be the beaten Epsom Derby favorite. I'm drawn.
Delacroix.
We'll say that again.
Delacroix.
Thank you so much. I just had a brain freeze right there. But a terrific ride by Ryan Moore. Typically, this horse likes to run on the front end, but he kind of got in the back of the pack there and was behind a wall of horses and came on with an extremely strong finish just to nail Ombudsman at the wire. So nice rebound performance by Delacroix. He's proven not to be a 1.5 mile horse like that, like they tried to test him at Epsom, but is definitely a 1.25 mile type. I think both of these horses, Delacroix and Ombudsman, can uh, meet again in the international stakes at York in August, and that might be a race that Field of Gold could target too. He's going to have an interim race in the Sussex Stakes at Goodwood at the end of this month, so that would be a tremendous showdown between two top quality 3-year-olds and the older horse Ombudsman if it comes to fruition. And John Gosden trains both Field of Gold and Ombudsman, so lots to look forward to the rest of the summer on the English racing scene. These are two quality horses.
And to
I was going
finish
to ask
up,
you,
oh,
it
go
looked
ahead.
like, sorry to interrupt you, Ashley, but it looked like there was a spirited conversation between the Gosdens and Buick after. Did you think there was anything wrong with the ride that he gave the horse? I thought it looked it was solid.
Yeah, I kind of thought it was solid too. I think John Gosden also has a reputation for bringing his jockeys aside. With that narrow of a loss, I'm sure he's giving them, some detailed analysis of their rides. And for a trainer, I think John Gosden has a terrific mind as far as race riding tactics is concerned. I've seen and listened to a lot of his post race interviews in the past with, analyzing what jockeys did right, what they did wrong. Just a marvelous intellectual person John Gosden is. So I'm sure he gave the rider his 2 cents on what happened there, but like all top quality trainers, he's moving on to the next target. And there's no ill will going forward.
Makes sense.
To close out the show, I'll take it to Los Alamitos for the Great Lady M, where we had another big upset this week with Copian, who was second to Sweet Azteca. Sweet Azteca coming off a very long layoff, 9-month layoff, and just went straight to the front and was able to go all the way and actually best her track record that she set last year in the Great Lady M. She finished 6.5 furlongs in 1:14:33, or that was the previous record actually. So she lowered that just barely this weekend. But Copian, it did come out that she lost a shoe at some point in the race. Not exactly sure where it happened, but that may have affected her slightly here. But you can see Sweet Azteca just running away with it. Little glitch in the replay there, but looks like a very solid sprinter and kind of shook things up slightly with the female sprint division because Copian was on a 3-win streak, had that big win at Churchill Downs on Derby Day, and looked like she was just maybe even arguably one of the best sprinters, even comparing to the males, but now has her first loss in quite a bit. And Sweet Azteca has kind of inserted herself into the conversation, making her first start of the season after such a long layoff. She is going to try to appear in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint at Del Mar, and her trainer mentioned maybe pointing her over at Saratoga first and shipping her over there to get one more race under her belt, but he's going to have most of his horses stabled at Del Mar over the summer. So we'll see where she ends up next. She won the Rancho Bernardo last season over in California, so she could appear there again, but we may see her at Saratoga taking on some top competition. So Sweet Azteca, not one to sleep on in the sprint division.
Very true. In fact, it was almost a year ago she was considered the boss in this division until that bad effort in the Chillingworth that derailed her. But I'm not altogether certain she's not just kind of a Los Alamitos horse for course. And I want to give Copian another excuse, but it's not like she's had many before. So I'd want to see it one more time. I also thought they were going to end up at Santa Anita around the turn in that race with the way went 10-12 pass off the rail.
Yeah, very wide turn there. All right, well, I think that's all the time we have today for the Racing Roundtable. Thank you again, Nick, for joining us. We will be back next Tuesday to talk more stakes action from that Saratoga summer meet. And yeah, we'll see you next Tuesday.
Thanks, Ashley. And yes, Colonial Downs coming up.
When it comes to horse racing, you can never have too much information.
No
With Twin Spires, you can place your bets with confidence. Whether you use handicapping insights like our Brisnet speed ratings, prime power, and past performances, the guidance of our experts' top picks, or just choose a name that catches your eye. Yes! No matter how you pick your horse, bet with Twin Spires. And now you can race to victory with Twin Spires tournaments.